Good evening. I'm Paul Fredette.
And I'm Karen Fredette.
Welcome. And thank you for joining us as Karen and I bring to a close this evening this series of reflections on the life and the times of Clare of Assisi, a truly remarkable and inspirational person, recognized as such in her own day, the early 13th century, and an outstanding witness and a model for us even in our own times 800 years later. Karen and I have been walking with you these past 4 months through the life and times of Clare of Assisi, and for us it's been both a joy and a privilege. Most of the material that we've used in these reflections have been taken from the 10 years of research that Karen originally published in 1984, entitled Clare, Her Light, and Her Song. This work was reprinted again last year in 2012 on the occasion of the 800th anniversary of the founding of the Poor Clares, and is available from us if you would like to have your own copy at our website, ravensbreadministries.com. That's ravensbreadministries.com. Ravensbread Ministries is all lowercase letters and it's all run together, no spaces. When we last met together, we were reflecting on the last great project of Clare's life. It was the writing of a formal rule of life. This is something we have to remember, that no woman had yet attempted in religious life, much less accomplished.
They may have attempted, but they certainly never got papal approval.
This was an effort that consumed the remainder of Clare's life. It was preserving the vision, the inspiration, and the legacy of her lifelong friend, her mentor, and her spiritual guide, Francis of Assisi, who had by now been dead over 25 years. We come now this evening to her final years and her death, a period no less replete with marvelous events that portray for us so clearly how this exceptionally courageous woman fought literally to her very deathbed to guarantee the survival of the vision that she and Francis had shared, and to ensure the continuity of a path that they had begun together nearly 40 years earlier. Karen?
We're looking at Clare during the last years of her life when she was very ill and repeatedly came to the door of death. She was weakened so that the majority of the time she spent lying on her cot in the corner of this dormitory that we're looking at. As you can see in the far corner, there is a roped off area where Clare's pallet would have been when she was living with her sisters.
If you recall from our earlier broadcast, this dormitory lies directly above the chapel of San Damiano.
It was Holy Week of 1250 when Clare received something that she had said she had long awaited. The sisters had the unusual permission of receiving Holy Communion that day. In those years, generally, the people were allowed to receive Holy Communion only 7 times a year. So it was held to be a very special privilege. After the liturgical services for Holy Thursday, Clare retired to her pallet and fell into a trance. Her sisters spoke of this. It was Philippa who spoke of this only after Clare's death. But in that trance, her biographer says, Clare followed the Lord in his prayer in the garden. His being sorrowful even unto death was caught up in remembrance of his arrest, his imprisonment, his mockery. Thus, lying on her bed all that night and the next day, she remained so wholly absorbed and wrapped out of herself that while her eyes stare steadily at one object, she seems crucified with Christ and completely insensible. This probably is Clare's experience of what Francis felt on Laverna, which afterwards he carried the imprint of the wounds of Christ on his body. Clare certainly carried the imprint on her soul and spirit. Her certain trusted daughter, and it was probably Philippa, would come to see if she might need anything, but hesitated to awaken her until, when Friday night comes, she lights the candle and by signs without words recalls to Clare her obedience to Francis. That is, that she was not to pass 24 hours without eating something. Immediately, as soon as Clare is reminded of this, she comes out of her ecstatic state. And she said, well, what is the need of a candle? Is it not day? Mother, replied Philippa, the night is gone and the day is past, and another night is at hand. And Clare responds, blessed be this sleep, dearest daughter, for I have long desired it, and now it has been given to me. Beware lest you tell anyone of this sleep as long as I shall live. And Philippa did not. She was silent about it, telling only after Clare's death of this experience.
In the spring of 1251, Innocent IV, who, as we mentioned last week, had moved the papal court to Lyon, France, for fear of Frederick II, his opponent on the continent and throughout the Italian peninsula. Well, by the spring of 1251, Innocent IV feels confident enough in view of the changed political realities, because in the earlier part of the year, Frederick II unexpectedly dies of dysentery on one of his military campaigns. And so now Innocent feels free enough to begin his return from Lyon to Rome. Of course, he's still very cautious, and he makes his journey in small stages, and finally arrives in Perugia, just 12 miles from Assisi, in November of 1251, and he proceeds to make this his residence. Perugia becomes his residence for the next 18 months until he briefly goes to Assisi. When they arrive, though, and of course he arrives with his entire retinue, among whom is Cardinal Rinaldo, the cardinal protector of the poor ladies and Clare's ardent friend and supporter. As soon as they arrive in Perugia, Cardinal Rinaldo is given to understand that Clare has suffered yet another extreme setback and in her health, and that she may actually be at death's door. So he rushes from Perugia to Assisi to visit her, and knowing that her strength is ebbing, Clare earnestly and she tearfully begs him to petition the Pope, who is residing just 12 miles away, to confirm the rule that she has finally finished. She has written this rule, which includes the privilege of absolute poverty, and she wants the Pope to confirm this and approve this for the poor ladies, for all the poor ladies. And so Cardinal Rinaldo takes a copy of this rule back to Perugia, and he assures Clare that he will do everything that he possibly can to fulfill her request. Well, it isn't until September of the following year, in 1252, that Rinaldo finally sends Clare a document confirming in perpetuity all that she had requested.
Do you think it took so long because they were looking at a rule written by a woman?
Good bet, Karen. Good bet. At any rate, we really don't know why it took this much time, but this document came, and while it provided an immense relief for Clare, it did give some measure of reassurance to her. It still did not go far enough, because on close reading of the document, it appears, and anyone reading it today could easily see, that it approves the way of life at the monastery of San Damiano, but says nothing about the other monasteries of poor ladies. And now we have to understand, we're talking about the year 1252. By now, there are nearly 40 monasteries, 40, throughout the Italian peninsula, and across the Alps, there are nearly 60 monasteries of poor ladies, the length and breadth of Europe. So this is a matter of grave concern for Clare, who knows that she cannot be satisfied. She's determined, ill as she is, she's determined to live long enough to fulfill, not in part, but completely, the trust that she feels believes she's received from Francis himself, to see that this way of life remains intact as it was given to her by him.
Because all of the other poor Clare communities were bound by a different form of rule, in fact, several different forms, and she wanted to make sure that there would be uniform observance of the privilege of poverty and the vision of Francis. Although Rinaldo's approval gave her some joy, I think something else happened in January of that year which gave her even more joy. And that was that her beloved sister Agnes returns to San Damiano. Agnes has been away almost 33 years since she was sent by Francis in 1219 to help to establish various monasteries of the poor Clares in the observance of the spirit of Clare and Francis. And she has been doing this faithfully. No doubt letters have been going back and forth between Agnes and Clare, but letters were only carried by messengers as they could be found, and when the roads were dangerous, these were not available. Somehow I think the sisters let Agnes know that Clare was near to death and would not live out the year, and Agnes could not stay away any longer. She flew to Clare's side, and she's overwhelmed when she sees how emaciated and weakened her sister is. And she burst into tears, and according to Celano, she begs Clare not to depart and leave her so soon after this long-awaited reunion. Well, to comfort her, Clare responds gently, "It is God's good pleasure, dearest sister, that I go hence. But do you cease weeping, for you shall come to the Lord soon after me. And before you do, the Lord shall grant you great consolation." This is actually Clare's prediction of Agnes' death. For Clare will die in August, Agnes will die the following November. Do you want to explain this?
Well, what we're looking at right here is a relatively recent icon, and it is an icon that depicts Clare of Assisi on your left, on the viewer's left, at a writing table, obviously penning a letter. There is the basin and towel of a servant at the bottom of the tau cross. Etched in the horizontal piece of the tau cross are the words Anam Cara. Anam Cara meaning spiritual friend, friend of my soul. And on the right is a depiction of Agnes of Prague holding a letter. This is a beautiful rendition of the correspondence between Clare of Assisi and Agnes of Prague. We've commented already in these last few weeks on the first few letters, and this evening we'd like to present for you in much more detail her final letter to Agnes of Prague, which we believe she received help in writing, don't we, Karen?
Yes, it's very likely that Clare would have been unable at that point to write a letter herself and would have had to dictate it to one of her sisters, and a likely one would have been her own sister Agnes. It is possible that it was written after Easter of that year because it resounds with many of the themes of the Easter liturgies. And it's written with such warmth, such freedom of expression of her heart, that I believe she could only have dictated that if the person taking it down was someone very close to her. So she starts to her Alamkara, her soulmate, her soul friend, and writes, "To her who is the half of my soul and the special shrine of my heart's deepest love, to the illustrious Queen and Bride of the Lamb, the Eternal King, to the Lady Agnes, my most dear mother, and of all the others, my favorite daughter. Clare, an unworthy servant of Christ, and a useless handmaid of his handmaids in the monastery of San Damiano of Assisi." Here again, Clare, the useless handmaid.
No doubt that may perhaps account for the wash basin and towel at the foot of the towel.
Very much, yes. She wishes Agnes health and a prayer that she may sing a new song with the other most holy virgins before the throne of God and the Lamb, and follow the Lamb wherever he may go. Now, this introduction is another one of those graceful, intuitive writings of Clare, where she's writing to Agnes in Latin about the Lamb, which in Latin is Agnus. So she's this play on words
on Agnes's name.
on Agnes's name
Latin,
in
right.
Latin, Agnes Agnus. She's urging, and the Lamb is one of the Easter the
Symbols of the Christ.
symbols of the Christ. So we have, and she speaks of the new song, which St. Augustine wrote very beautifully about, and which Clare would have written also, knowing his writings. And then she pays a very graceful tribute to Agnes's fidelity, which by this time has been known to Clare for over 25 years. She writes, O mother and daughter, spouse of the King of all ages, if I have not written to you as often as your soul and mine well desire, and we realize that 10 to 15 years have passed between this letter and the previous one. And Clare explains why. First of all, she says, do not wonder or think that the fire of love for you glows less sweetly in the heart of your mother. No, this is the difficulty, the lack of messengers, and the obvious dangers of the roads. Now, however, as I write to your love, I rejoice and exult with you in the joy of the Spirit, O bride of Christ, because since you have totally abandoned the vanities of this world, like another most holy virgin, Saint Agnes, you would have been marvelously espoused to the spotless Lamb who takes away the sins of the world. Clare knows Agnes would have been never doubt her love for her, but she has to reiterate it. And then she goes on, quoting once again, as she did in her first letter to Agnes, from the office, the liturgy of Agnes Patroness, Agnes of Rome. And it's as if Clare can't resist singing in poetic form, so she chooses these phrases that in Latin must have been extremely poetic. She says, happy is she to whom it is given to come to the sacred banquet of him whose beauty all the heavenly host admire, whose love inflames our love, whose contemplation is our refreshment, whose graciousness is our joy, whose gentleness fills us to overflowing, whose remembrance brings a gentle light. These cadenced phrases evoke melodies of the troubadours. And remember, Francis was the troubadour of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And although we've never actually seen it written that Clare loved music, I think it's very likely that she took great delight in it, simply by the way she wrote. So this is about the only hint we have, this lilting style of her letters. But she goes on, inasmuch as this vision is the splendor of eternal glory, the brilliance of eternal light, and the mirror without blemish, look upon this mirror each day, O Queen and Spouse of Jesus Christ, and continually study your own face within it. The mirror she initially referred to was Jesus, but by looking at Jesus, Agnes is to see her own face, what it is that she is to be, so that you may adorn yourself within and without with the beautiful robes and cover yourself with the gems and the flowers of springtime of all the virtues. Now this is one woman writing to another woman, using imagery that would no doubt appeal to Agnes as a woman, and as it obviously appealed to Clare.
Mm-hmm.
She is complimenting Agnes on her growth in her love of Jesus, and is urging her on
to adorn herself.
Yes.
Adorn herself with these virtues, which she talks about as the jewels and the flowers, but they're the virtues, they're the attitudes of Christ himself, for which Clare has a perpetual fascination. And she continues to develop. She doesn't only kind of put forth the image of the mirror, she develops this mirror, it's like, again, as Karen said, musically, it's all variations on a theme. And so she encourages Agnes to look at the parameters of the mirror and compares that to the poverty of Christ. And she asks her to look at the surface mirror of the mirror, the surface itself, and to look at the holy humility of Christ. And then to plummet into the depths of the mirror and look at what Clare calls the ineffable charity, the love of Christ, in which his passion and death were suffered. And so she just goes through this tremendous tour de force with the image of the mirror and ends up by saying, "From this moment then, O Queen of our heavenly King," she calls Agnes, "let yourself be inflamed more strongly with the fervor of charity." This rich passage is Clare's final praise. It's her last laud, so to speak.
And her last gift to Agnes.
Yes, and she bequeaths to Agnes this song that has really formed the theme of her whole life. One of the great Christian writers that came before Clare somewhat, with whom she would have been familiar, would have been William of St. Thierry. He and his close friend Bernard of Clairvaux developed a lot of love song kind of theology and spirituality. Bernard himself, at William's request, did this commentary on the Song of Songs, and it was very much influenced by the High Middle Ages and the culture of courtly love. And this really informed the spirituality and the spiritual theology of the day. And it really encapsulates Clare, what William said, "You, Lord, first loved us so that we might love you. Not because you needed our love, but because we could not be what you created us to be, except by loving you." Now, Clare would have been very familiar with this work, and these kind of love-inspired homilies are they're pretty much in the background of Clare's thought whenever she quotes the passages from the Song of Songs. And of course, there's one very special one that she had received from the lips of Innocent IV, Innocent III,
yes,
when he himself, way back when, in the early days, had confirmed the privilege of poverty for Clare. He was eloquent and quoted from the Song of Songs, and she now repeats this again to Agnes of Prague, as she says, "As you contemplate further his ineffable delights, the Lord's, eternal riches and honors, and sigh for them in the great desire and love of your heart, you may cry out, 'Draw me after you.' We will run in the fragrance of your perfumes, O heavenly spouse. I will run and not tire until you bring me into the wine cellar." And hear that quote from the Song of Songs that Innocent had put in that original bull of approval. "Until you bring me into the wine cellar, until your left hand is under my head, and your right hand will embrace me happily, and you will kiss me with the happiest kiss of your mouth."
Clare kept this in her heart. It flows out of her letters, out of her so freely that, the beginning and the end of her life is summed up in this letter.
Yeah. And now she goes on to really beg Agnes, in a way, not to forget her. She says, in such contemplation, may you remember your poor little mother, knowing that I have inscribed the happy memory of you indelibly on the tablets of my heart, holding you dearer than all the others. What more can I say, she says. It's almost as though she's reluctant to ever end this letter because, of course, she knows it will be her last. Let the tongue of the flesh be silent when I seek to express my love for you, and let the tongue of the Spirit speak, because the love that I have for you, O blessed daughter, can never be fully expressed by the tongue of the flesh. And even what I have written is an inadequate expression. So now she pens her tender farewell, echoing Jesus' own emotions recorded in John's farewell discourse. I beg you to receive my words with kindness and devotion, seeing in them at least the motherly affection which in the fire of charity I feel daily toward you and your daughters in Christ, to whom I warmly commend myself and my own daughters in Christ. On their part, these very daughters of mine, the rest of the sisters at San Damiano, especially the most prudent Virgin Agnes, our sister, recommend themselves in the Lord to you and your daughters. Farewell, my dearest daughter, to you and to your daughters, until we meet at the throne of the glory of the great God. This, we want you to have this desire for us. Clare's love even overflows to include the scribe and the bearer of the letters. So here we are in 1253, right before Clare's death. And we really see Clare in the full flowering of her natural and her supernatural gifts. Her womanhood has achieved an exquisite femininity, and her personality radiates in a marvelous wholeness. Pope Alexander IV, her beloved Cardinal Rinaldo, will praise her as, quote, the new woman of the valley of Spoleto, who poured forth a new fountain of the water of life to refresh and benefit souls, a fountain which since has flowed in many streams throughout the whole of Christendom and watered many nurseries of religious life.
Of course, this is making mention again of the many, many monasteries of poor Clares that had been established, or poor ladies as they were known. In the spring of 1253, Pope Innocent IV and his entourage move across the valley from Perugia to Assisi because a great event is about to take place. The upper basilica of San Francesco is now completed. Now, it's been about 25 years since the dedication of the lower one, and we may think that's a very long time, but in those days,
right,
that was an extraordinarily short period to build something so magnificent and to begin the decoration of it by the greatest painters and fresco designers of the day. On May 25th, Pope Innocent dedicates the upper basilica and then hears that Clare once again is slipping, and he makes a point that he and his cardinals go down to the little monastery of San Damiano and up to the dormitory where the sisters have Clare resting, and they visit her.
But before that, this happens in the first week of August.
Well, actually, he visits her twice.
He does?
Yes. Okay. This is the first visit.
And we have a picture of this. visit of Clare, early iconography of Clare, laying on her pallet, and right up above her, in the upper left-hand area, are the friars and some of the sisters, and to the right is the Pope and a retinue of cardinals that are there, visiting her at her bedside. Um, as Karen said, the great festivities surrounding the dedication of the upper basilica happen in May of 1253, but by the end of July, Clare is so weak that she can no longer even take any nourishment. And she's here. What you see before you is the corner, that a close-up of that corner of the dormitory where her pallet was, and this roped off area which you see before you is, well, actually you can see it right in here. This closed off area is where Clare's pallet would have been. And at this point, by July, she really can no longer take any nourishment. She's so emaciated, and her body is really being consumed by starvation and dehydration. Nonetheless, she remains alert and responsive and very compassionate, and actually is instrumental in healing some of the people who come to see her at that time. The rest of her sisters gather around her and, heedless of their own need for food and for rest, they keep watch by her bedside. Among them are her own two sisters, Agnes and also Beatrice, and of course the ever faithful Pacifica Guelfuccio, who's been with her from the very start, and her lifelong companions, Philippa, Benvenuta, Christiana, the daughters of her cousins, among them Belvina and Amata. They're all there watching as the strength slowly but definitely ebbs from Clare's body. When it becomes known outside the monastery that she's approaching her final hour, the Pope and the bishops, or the Pope and the cardinals who are with him in his retinue, once again make a visit. It's the first week in August, and Clare is extremely weak, so weak that she cannot even rise to make the customary reverence to the Pope. So, although she kisses the fisherman's ring, she insists that he steps up on a stool so that she can, in the custom of the day, kiss his slippered foot. He inquires of her what her needs are, and she confides to him her last two requests. The first of which is that she asks, would he grant her an indulgence for the remission of her sins? At which point the records show that Pope Innocent burst forth in great emotion. Would to God, he said, that I had no more need of forgiveness than you. And graciously he imparts the desired blessing, assuring her of full absolution for all her past failures, and the plentiful benediction which it lies in his power as Vicar of Christ to bestow. And now finally Clare whispers her request for the one last thing for which she has spent her life: his papal approval of her rule, which will ensure that all the monasteries of the poor ladies everywhere will be permitted to live the same form of life with the highest poverty as she has joyously lived for 42 years at San Damiano. No doubt Innocent gave her verbally his approval right then and there, but this doesn't entirely reassure Clare, she has to see the seal of the fisherman's ring impressed on the written bull. And so Innocent leaves her, assuring her that it will very soon be within her hands. All this time that the Pope has been there, Sister Philippa has been at her side and was impressed that after the Pope and his retinue left, she remembers Clare turning to her and the other sisters and saying, "O my daughters, thank the Lord God for me, because all the heavens and earth cannot suffice to praise God for me today, since I have received him in the Blessed Sacrament and have also seen his vicar." It is typical of Clare that she placed the reception of her sacramental Lord ahead of even the exceptional honor of a papal visit at her very bedside.
But Clare had taken good advantage of that papal visit because Innocent made the mistake of asking, "Is there anything more I can do for you?" And Clare says, "Oh, yes, there is." And because Innocent realizes that there really isn't time to go through the entire curial process, he takes the document that Cardinal Reynaldo had already written, and he adds a few words in his own handwriting. He says, ad instar fiat, and puts a capital S after it. It means, so be it, and S stands for his baptismal name, Sinibaldo. And then he adds one other sentence in Latin, which says, "For reasons known to me and to the protector of the monastery, so be it," which means everything that is here is to be observed. I approve it. He gives the bull to one of the friars and urges him to rush down to San Damiano, and it is put into Clare's hands. She sees the impress of the fisherman's ring in the red wax, and another hand wrote in the margin of this bull these words: "Blessed Clare touched and kissed this many times." Literally, pluribus et pluribus, over and over again, out of devotion and gratitude. Who may have written that? It could have been one of the sisters, could have been Agnes herself, or one of the friars. But we know that Clare had it in her hands when she died. The most important sentence in this approval was this: "I grant you the form of life that Blessed Francis gave you." Clare now is ready to die. Her sisters are beside her day and night. One evening, about 2 days before she dies, Sister, I think it was Benvenuta, is watching with the other sisters, and most of them are drowsing, not surprisingly, but she begins to try to keep awake by thinking about the heavenly court preparing to receive Clare, and suddenly she's startled to see, coming through the doorway of the dormitory, a procession of holy virgins, all alight, dressed in white, and among them, she said, one more beautiful than all the others, which is another way of saying the Virgin Mary herself.
This is an illustration by the artist Murillo that captures that vision, that moment in time, where Clare is in the on the left, surrounded by sisters and friars, and this vision of the heavenly court coming to in the presence of Clare's deathbed is depicted.
And it is said, Benvenuta said, she saw the Virgin spread a very thin, translucent cloth over Clare and bend down, and she doesn't know, but she suspects that she kissed her as a reassurance that her death was near, but she would be accompanied safely. Clare herself is meditating, and she starts speaking to herself at another time, and the sisters hear her saying, "Go in peace, for you will be well escorted, for he who created you has provided for you and has infused into you his Holy Spirit. He has ever guarded you as a mother her dearest child." And Sister Anastasia says, "Well, to whom are you speaking?" And she says, "To my blessed soul." Clare's reiterating her confidence that she will not go alone on that loneliest of all journeys that humans have to make. They realize the end is near, and they are reciting the prayers for the dying. And among them is Psalm 116. "How shall I make a return to the Lord for all the good he has done for me? The cup of salvation I will take up. I will call upon the name of the Lord. My vows to the Lord I will pay in the presence of all his people." Clare's lips are moving, and Agnes bends near and hears these final words on Clare's lips: "Precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of his faithful ones." The morning is rising on the morning of Monday, August 11th. And as Thomas of Celano wrote, "Thus Clare passed from this life to God, shining indeed without a shadow, without any stain of sin, entering into the eternal light." And who do you believe was there to welcome her, if not her beloved soul friend, Francis?
This is a very recent illustration, and it's one of Karen and I's absolute favorite renditions of Clare and Francis both, with feet in the water and just totally relishing and delighting in the presence and joy of the Holy Spirit below the city of Assisi, which is up in the upper part of the illustration. But they are just filled with light, and the movement of their bodies suggests that they are filled with song and dance as well. It's absolutely one of our favorite illustrations of Saints Clare and Francis. Um, what we would, let me see, we should say at this point that Clare dies on the 11th of August, the morning of the 11th of August, which is the annual feast of San Rufino, the first bishop of the city of Assisi, and already a great festival day in Assisi. Now, you would think that as news spread from San Damiano of the death of Clare, that would put a damper on the day. It did not, because the people all throughout just ran, knowing that they had another saint in their midst here in Assisi. And so there was this great joy and great throng. And the very next day, after the festival, the Pope himself and his retinue came down to the monastery of San Damiano, which was already just completely overrun and jammed by all of the townspeople of Assisi. Everyone in the whole area was there. And Pope Innocent enters as the friars are atoning the office of the dead, and he tries to put a stop to it by saying, no, you should be praying not the office of the dead, but the office of virgins, at which right away Cardinal Rinaldo tugs on the pontiff's sleeve and reminds him that this would be going just a little bit too fast, because it would be tantamount, such a thing would be tantamount to canonizing Clare as a saint before she's even in her tomb. So reluctantly, Innocent allows the friars to go on with the funeral rites and sing the office of the dead. The man, however, just can't wait to begin the canonization procedures for Clare, and unfortunately, he dies the following December before the process can be completed, and it falls to his successor, to Alexander IV, who is actually Cardinal Rinaldo, who has succeeded him, and the longtime friend, supporter, and protector of the poor ladies. Now it is his duty to be able to pronounce the canonization, officiate at the actual canonization proceedings, which is another very poetic rendition of Clare's life and her name. And we just want to share with you maybe just a few stanzas from that proclamation, which begins, "O wondrous blessed clarity of Clare! In life she shone to a few, after death she shines on the whole world. On earth she was a clear light, now in heaven she is a brilliant sun. For though Clare was hidden, her life was known to all. Though Clare was silent, her fame cried out. Though Clare was enclosed in her cell, she was preached to men in all cities. Indeed, while Clare, in the seclusion of her solitude, broke the alabaster vase of her body, the whole building of the church was filled with the fragrance of her sanctity." Karen, would you introduce our...
We now have the privilege of sharing with you the fourth letter of Clare as it was set to music by Briege O'Hare, the Irish Poor Clare, whose music we have used throughout. And we want you to follow the words. We have them laid out for you. And listen to Clare's final farewell to her beloved friend, and to consider that it is Clare's farewell to us as we close our study of Clare's life.
After all the words, what more can I say? The love which I have for you, my friend, glows ever sweetly in my heart. When you come before the Lord, remember my Farewell, my dear friend. You've been mother and daughter to me, as I've been to you. Farewell till we meet at last, before the throne of God. Till then I commend to your prayers this one mother to your son. But before I say farewell, there is one thing I must add, that you cling with all your heart to the one who is our Lord, whose love inflames our life, whose beauty outward, whose gentleness makes peace. Oh, gracious
We always listen to this and find it profoundly moving, and even more so when we realize who it is who wrote it. It was set to this music by Brice here, and if you would like to get a copy of this cassette or CD that we have been playing for you throughout our study on Clare, you can get it through Hermitage Productions, and they have a website, the Sisters in Ireland, and it's simply called www.poorclaresireland.org. All small caps, all small letters,
No
and no
spaces.
spaces.
Once again, we want to thank you for being with us throughout these many weeks as we reflected on the life of this wonderful, wonderful, inspiring person. We want to thank the Tau community, the interfaith community of Franciscans, especially Brother Sean, for his gracious invitation to us to join in their efforts in presenting these weekly sessions. And we want to say our farewell and our goodbye in the words of Clare herself. And so we say to you, as she said to Agnes
in her testament also, what you hold, may you always hold.
what you do, may you always do, and never abandon.
But with swift pace, light step, unswerving feet,
so that even your steps stir up no dust.
may you go forward securely, joyfully, and swiftly
on the path of prudent happiness. And finally, may the Lord bless you and keep you.
May he show his face to you and be merciful to you.
May the Lord turn his countenance to you and give you peace.
May the Lord be with you always.
And wherever you are, may you be with him always. Karen and I would like once again to thank you. It's been our joy. It's been our privilege. We thank you, we say good night, and God bless you.
God be with you.